Hello today. I will tell you about a case that happened more than 100 years ago in the 1880s in the area Whitechapel of East London, England. A villain who committed a series of brutal murders that shocked the whole country. His method of committing crimes was extremely brutal. His reputation spread terror to many people until now. To this day, the real identity of the keeper remains a mystery. Known as one of the 10 most mysterious cases in the world, he is Jack the Killer. Reaper Story takes place at the end of the century 119th. In England, London is one of the most prosperous cities in the world and has attracted a large number of immigrants, including refugees. This led to a rapid decline in the number of jobs, leaving many people unemployed. The Whitechapel area of East London, with its cheap rent, has become the choice of many. People with high incomes, gradually lower, here concentrate a large number of immigrants. Environment and security in Whitechapel was so bad to maintain order, the London police had to reinforce. The police force here can be seen patrolling the streets day and night. However, compared to the large number of people, the police force is still too thin, and the security situation does not seem to improve. The White Hill area is a complex place where all kinds of people live to survive. Some women are forced to become prostitutes. They have to go out every day to attract customers and earn a small income. August 6, 1888 was Tuesday, the day of the murder. The first case that shocked the world happened at 4:45 a.m. in Whitechapel area at an apartment on a windy street. A worker was getting ready to go out to work at the school when he came on the first floor stairs. He found a woman lying on her back on the floor, her lower body missing. Wearing nothing but blood all around the scene was extremely tragic. After seeing this scene, the worker immediately ran out into the street, and 5 minutes later he found a police officer on patrol and quickly took the man away. Police arrived at the crime scene and found 39 wounds on the victim's lower abdomen and a stab wound to the head. 30 teaspoons. Forensic staff were present at the school after the autopsy determined the victim died approximately 3 hours before the discovery. The victim's body was located on the first floor of the apartment. The police took statements from the people. A female resident living in the apartment said that around dawn she heard someone calling for help. However, due to the area Whitechapel often happens, family violence and screaming at night is not uncommon, so she did not notice that 2 other people living in the apartment said they returned home at 2 a.m. and saw no one at the bridge. Another person said he got home at 3:30 a.m. There was a person there was lying on the floor, but because it was dark, I couldn't see clearly and thought it was a guy. The drunken wanderer was sleeping there, so he didn't care to put together the clues the police were guessing. At the time, the victim's death was between 2 and 3:30 a.m. The victim was identified as Martha Tiber, 38 years old, working as a prostitute. Her residence is number 19 Joe Street, just a few blocks from the crime scene. 100 M. According to Char, the night before, Martha and some girls in the same profession went drinking with 2 soldiers at a bar 11:45 p.m. Victim Martha and one of 2 soldiers left the boat at about 2:30 a.m. that morning while on patrol. A police patrol officer said, while patrolling near the crime scene, he saw a suspicious man wandering the streets. The man looked like a soldier in his 20s, white skin, black hair with a brown mustache. The police officer approached, went to ask the soldier, said he was waiting for an acquaintance who would leave after the incident. This soldier was suspected of being involved. 2 days later at the local army barracks, all the soldiers were given leave. All officers on the day of the incident were required to gather for identification by the patrol officer. After the officer was identified, the police believe that there were 2 soldiers who closely resembled the man he had seen that evening. However, both the above soldiers all provided credible alibi evidence and were therefore cleared of the charges. An investigation period without results. 25 days after the first case occurred, the second case occurred. 3:40 minutes On the morning of Wednesday, August 31, 1888, a coachman was driving a carriage. Horses walk on the streets of Dongda-don area as they pass through a horse riding area on Bakrao Street in the area. Whitechurchley, he was suddenly called back by a man. This man named Charlotte Cross looked panicked. Tell the coachman that there is a man lying at the entrance to the horse stables who appears to be dead. It is still early in the morning. There were no streetlights, so it was very dark around. The two of them went to the horse owner's entrance to take a closer look at what they saw. There was a woman lying on her back on the ground, her eyes wide open, her skirt was pulled up. Two people touched her face. The woman felt her hand was still warm, but it was cut off at 3:45 a.m. A police officer. The patrol was present at Yen Truong when the flashlight shone on the woman and they discovered many scars on her face. She had bruises and several broken teeth on her neck. She had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen, was slashed open and slid out of the scene in a tragic scene at 4 a.m. The coroner arrived at the scene and conducted an examination. The estimated time of death for the victim was approximately 3:30 a.m. That is, only about 7 minutes before the father and the coachman discovered the body of the murder. Suspect was a crocodile. A knife 15 to 20 centimeters long is most likely a switchblade, or a bogey could also be a knife. The way the victim's abdomen was cut open was not what ordinary people would expect. The murderer may have had some knowledge of the victim's autopsy identified her as 43-year-old Mary and Nico, who also abused prostitutes. Her residence was a motel on Thade Street, according to the investigation, and at 1:20 a.m. On the day of the incident, Mary returned home and the landlord asked for rent, but because Mary did not have enough money, so she left the motel, and at 2:30 a.m. at White Street Church. And on a date not far from the inn, a friend of Mary saw her sitting against the wall looking drunk. This location is only 800 meters from the horse temple where the body was found. This friend wanted to take Mary home, but she refused later. Then Mary went alone towards the horse owner. A policeman who was investigating passed by, horse at 3:15 a.m., but did not detect anything unusual 25 minutes later. 2 men discovered Mary's body at the horse owner's entrance. There were no other witnesses to the case. No one heard any strange noises. The police initially suspected the culprit was the father who first discovered the body. They probably thought that after killing Mary, Charles accidentally saw a coachman. A horse passed by and then pretended to be the one who discovered the body. However, Charles was finally cleared of suspicion, and the identity of the mastermind behind the crime remains a mystery. Within a month, 2 consecutive murders occurred in the Q-Chapo area, and people began to link the 2 cases together because both victims were prostitutes and the perpetrators' methods of committing the crime were quite similar. The difference was that the victim in the case, the first victim, was stabbed multiple times in the stomach, while the second victim was disemboweled. However, police said this case is just a coincidence with no evidence to suggest they were committed by the same person. But only 8 the next day, another murder occurred in the White area, Chapo, and at 5:45 a.m. on Monday, September 8th. In 1888, a cabman living at 29 Hanbury Street discovered the woman was lying on the ground at the back door of an apartment building, her head facing the door. The apartment was about 15 centimeters from the steps. Police had face at the porch of the school and conduct an investigation of the victim's intestines being slashed and dragged out over the right shoulder, and on the neck there were 2, the knife, which cut deep into the uterus and part of the bladder with the air removed, was determined to be a 15 to 20 centimeter long knife. At the scene, there were also 2 pills, a torn envelope, and a piece of rough cloth, a comb and a leather bracelet were found on the victim, identified as Annie Chapman, 47th age, of working as a call girl. She has a serious illness, living at the Crossingham logging house at 35 Dote Street. The police have asked people living in the apartment where a man's body was found. They said he went out around 5 p.m. Check. The lock on the cellar door behind his house, because someone recently broke into his cellar to steal things after checking him out, sitting on the steps in the backyard. To cut a piece at that time there was no one else in the backyard except him. Another said it was around 5:15 a.m. when he went to the backyard to go to the bathroom. We heard a woman screaming. Another female resident said at about 5:30 a.m. she saw the suspect. Annie was talking to a man on the street. She couldn't see the man's face clearly, but she saw him from behind. This person is about 40 years old, a little taller than Annie, has black hair, wears a dark coat and a hat. A long while after passing the two of them, the woman heard the man ask Annie, "Do you agree?" Annie replied, "Yes." The police synthesized the clues to speculate the time of death of the victim. The victim was found between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m. at the scene by police, who found a sealed envelope, tattered and postmarked London, 28th August. In 1888, based on clues from Fongby, the police found a man named Edward Stanley. He was the lover. Annie regularly spent the night with her and every Saturday night and Sunday. However, Edge has provided evidence. The White Hill area is a complicated and chaotic place where no one can clearly see the face of the murderer in these cases. This has caused great difficulty for the police in solving the case. This time, the police have released some details of the case to the public. People hoping to receive a clue soon after rumors spread that the cases, the above, is related to a local man named John Spur, who was 38 years old. He was a Polish Jewish shoemaker nicknamed Leather Aeon. He often sang. Some Chinese tabloids have published news that this person heard that the police had come to the Piser's house to a search, found 5 long knives. However, Piser was able to provide an alibi and the time of the crime. Not only that, Piser also sued the tabloid that had defamed his reputation and was awarded damages 19 days after the incident. The local Central Press Office received a letter believed to be from the letter's owner, written in red ink. Dear boss, I keep hearing the news that the police are about to arrest me. Unfortunately, that is not true. The truth when I hear them, two-man said. The investigation is on track. I couldn't help but laugh, especially the joke about Le Aeon. It was really funny. I hate whores. I will not stop disemboweling until you catch me last time. I did. Very good, right? That woman didn't even have time to catch her breath. How could they caught me? I love this job and I will continue soon. You guys will heard about my new tricks. Last time I left some red paint in the ginger beer bottle, but unfortunately it quickly hardened like glue. Unusable. Using red ink seems to satisfy my desire. Next time I will cut off that woman's ear with scissors and send it to the police. Sounds interesting, but keep this letter. I will publish more when I finish some more works. My knife is really too sharp and awesome. Just given the chance, I will immediately get to work. Good luck. The letter was signed by the Reaper, and the sender admitted to being the killer. Caused the murders and mocked the police after receiving the letter. The police said it was just a malicious joke of someone, so did not take it seriously enough and did not publish the content of the letter, not expecting that soon after the area White Chile again the 4th murder occurred, and at 1:08 a.m. on Sunday, 30th in 1888, a cabman discovered a woman lying on the street in Dufy, Zat in the White Chile area. The victim was identified as 44-year-old Elizabeth Stye. Police were present at the scene and discovered 2 stab wounds on the victim's neck and several stab wounds on her chest. Cyanosis. The cause of death was due to excessive bleeding from the left jugular artery. The victim was not disemboweled. A witness said that at about 12:35 a.m. that day, he saw Elizabeth standing against the wall talking to a medium-built man wearing a long black coat. He heard. Elizabeth said, "No, not tonight. See you another day." A character, another. Witness said that at about 12:45 p.m. he saw Elizabeth being attacked by 4 men. This guy with black hair, about 1.65 tall with brown lips, tried to pull Elizabeth out the road but failed. Then the man pushed Elizabeth to the ground because the way the crime was committed was a bit strange, different from previous cases, so the police failed to connect the dots 45 minutes after the body was found. Elizabeth was discovered at 1:45 a.m. by a patrol officer. Another woman was found lying on the ground in the Maya Square, less than a kilometre from where Elizabeth was killed, identified as Catherine Ed, 46 years old, also sexually assaulted the victim's neck with two. The abdominal wall was slashed open, the intestines were pulled up and over the right shoulder, and some unidentified liquid was still on it. The victim's left kidney and most of the uterus were removed and were not found at Yen Truong. It is speculated that the master was carrying the body. According to the police, after killing Elizabeth, the killer used the same method to kill Catherine. But because someone passed by, he had to quickly leave the scene. On the way to escape, he met Catherine later. Murder and her stomach, so these two cases could be caused by the same perpetrator. The patrol officer who discovered Catherine's body said he found her at about 1:30 a.m. while patrolling the area. He did not find anyone in this area, so the time of Catherine's death is speculated to be between 1:30 and 1:45 a.m. at 3:01 a.m. Another police officer found a lurking car. Catherine's blood was found on Gon Street, not far from the crime scene, on the wall near where the apron was found. A chalk inscription seemingly implying that Jews were responsible for the murders. This series of suspicious objects often appear in the area, so the police cannot determine whether it was left by the perpetrator or whether there was pre-existing concern that these lines can incite hatred and riots. If people see them, the police will arbitrarily delete them. Two murders happened on the same night, causing panic among people living near the Whitechapel area. A group of merchants people, dissatisfied with the police's long-standing inability to prosecute cases, formed the White Knight Vigilance Committee, headed by a man named J.L., who was chairman of the committee, organized local people to patrol at night and monitor people. Kang Ang-hee also offered a reward of £50 for anyone who provided useful information 2 days after the Chu So Bao Chi case. The Central Committee received another letter with the following content. "I told you last time, that is not a lie. Just kidding, boss. Tomorrow you guys will hear about the monster and double murder. Unfortunately, the first bitch screamed, so I didn't have time to cut off her ear and send it to the police. Thanks for keeping the previous letter a secret for me. It was so hot, torn." The letter? This is still written in red ink. The handwriting is the same as the previous letter. This time, the writer calls himself a mischievous rat. He claimed responsibility for the deaths of both Elizabeth and Catherine. However, police learned that this letter was sent 24 hours after the two murders occurred. What was described in the letter was public information that had been posted in the press, so the police think these two letters are malicious jokes of the same journalist. However, this time the police have released the contents of two internal letters. The content of the two letters has caused a stir. In the first letter, the murderer said that he would cut off the victim's ear, and Catherine's ear was actually cut off. These two things coincide. So many people think that the person claiming to be the Reaper was most likely the real culprit. At the time, the court's Zoan newspaper has received hundreds of letters, most of which are malicious pranks. This letter could also be someone's joke, but the name, Jack the Deeper, the name mentioned in it was so special that later it was used to refer to the murderer on October 16, 1945. In 1888, the president of the police commission of the same name received a letter with the following content: "From hell to you, dear L, I am sending you half a kidney taken from that woman, the other half. It's already cooked and ready to eat. It's delicious. If you wait a little longer, I can send you the knife used to cut the kidney. He was free, so he came and arrested me. Unlike the previous times, the murderer did not call himself Jack the Ripper in the letter, but only sent it with a small wooden box. When opened, the wooden box, there was actually half a fruit inside. This time the police finally took the case seriously. They discovered that the handwriting in the third letter was clearly different. In contrast to the previous two letters, the third letter also contained numerous spelling and grammatical errors clearly written by someone else. Police sent half a kidney in a box to the Royal London Hospital for examination, and doctors said the kidney was the left kidney of the victim. Catherine had been soaked in brandy for preservation when her body was discovered. Her left kidney was missing, so many people assumed the upper half belonged to Sine. However, due to technical limitations, forensic doctors at this time cannot be 100% sure whether this is a kidney, whether it is human or not, let alone whether it belongs to Corinne or not. So also, some people say that this is an animal kidney, and the letter is just someone's malicious joke. This issue is still controversial. To this day, after the Deeper appeared, the police have received hundreds of letters believed to be from him. Most are fakes. However, this letter is considered to be the most likely to be genuine. As the police were still unsure what to do, another murder occurred at 10:45 a.m. on Friday. On November 9, 1888, a landlord's assistant went to the Whitechapel area to collect money. Mary Kelly rented a house. Kelly, 25, worked as a prostitute and missed out on rent. Home 6 weeks, Kelly lived in a small room with a door and 2 windows next to the assistant, who knocked on the door, but no one answered. He tried the door handle, but couldn't open it from the outside. Then he went to the side window edge, but the curtain blocked the view, so he couldn't see inside. However, the assistant soon discovered a hole. There was a hole in the window covered with cloth. The assistant immediately pulled the curtain and removed the cloth on the window. He used Huang, saw Kelly lying on the bed, bleeding all over the floor. The assistant immediately called the police. Police quickly arrived at Yen Truong and investigated Kelly's room, which was not large, and inside there was a bed and 3 tables, and a chair. On the head of the bed hung a picture of the deceased wife of fisherman Kelly, lying down on the bed, naked. There were obvious strangulation marks on the neck and 2 cuts in the abdomen. The internal organs were removed from the chest. Also had his face cut off and disfigured after an autopsy. The coroner concluded the cause of death was Kelly's death was caused by a slashed throat, and subsequent dismemberment is a knife 2.5 centimeters wide and 15 centimeters long, 4 times the size of a stick and similar to a murder weapon. Previous cases suggest that this was caused by Jack the Deeper. A friend of Kelly's gave information to the police, saying that at about 2 a.m. that day, Kelly had asked to borrow 6 cents from her and left. Not long after, she saw a Jewish man about 30 years old approach Kelly, too. People who seemed to know each other. Kelly's friend felt this man seemed strange when Kelly and that man passing by the man who deliberately pulled his Lachai hat low, as if not wanting to reveal his face. She saw Kelly and the man walk towards Kelly's house at about 2:45 a.m. Unfortunately, it is noteworthy that after this case, Jack the Deeper disappeared. No more murders of this nature have occurred in London. Some say since the murder. In the 2nd to 5th case, all 5 victims were disemboweled, while the Mather victim in the first case. Mather was only stabbed many times in the stomach. So the perpetrator who caused Mather's death could be someone else and should not link her case with the later cases. So 5 victims among the 4 cases. Cases 2 to 5 are called the 5 classic victims, while Mather's case is eliminated, except this series of serial murders has caused panic in public opinion. The names okay, the zipper makes. People terrified to the British government sent its top investigative team at the time to the White House area at the time to hunt for the culprit. The SL Home Detective novel series was very popular, so they invited Arthur Canando, the author of the novel series, to participate, i.e., investigation team found that the victims had some things in common. They were all prostitutes and most of them were married, and there are mild to severe addicts. The victims all show no signs of fierce resistance. The first victim, Mather, also has. These points have led some to believe that Mather may have been the first victim, yea, the deeper first case, except the first 4 victims. Mary, Annie, Elizabeth and Hinall were strangled left to right victim in the last case, Kelly, because the body was dismembered so the direction of cutting could not be determined. However, based on the bloodstains at the crime scene, police fan guessed that her neck was also cut from left to right. The investigation team believes that the perpetrator may have had knowledge of anatomy by profession, most likely a doctor or butcher, then the police. The police investigated almost all the butchers and doctors in London but could not find the suspect. This serious incident reached the ears of Queen Victoria. The Queen believed that the Whitechapel area near London, docked on every Thursday and Friday, a number of ships travelling between London and mainland Europe will stop there, then left on Saturday or Sunday, so the killer could be a slaughterman on the ship. This also makes sense, explaining why the crimes all happened on weekends. The police later investigated the case. The arrival dates of these ships were checked, but no ship was found whose arrival date exactly matched this date. Almost everyone in the Whitechapel area was investigated thoroughly, from more than 2,000 suspects down to more than 300 people, of which 80 subjects were arrested. Suspicion, but still no results in 1892 after 4 years of large-scale investigations. Police had spent a lot of human and material resources without achieving positive results, so they had to temporarily suspend the operation. The investigation into the case has become one of the most famous serial murders in Britain and the world since Jardir appeared. Until now, detectives all over the world want to solve this case, even though the case has already happened. For over 100 years, people have been researching and have discovered some characteristics of the first torn hip. Certain knowledge of human anatomy. He did it late at night. At that time, the street was unlit around pitch black. It's easy to hide his whereabouts. He comes and goes. No one knows. He acts very quickly, proves he was very skilled with the knife, preferring to slash his victims' necks from left to right. He may have been left-handed or both. Both hands were very proficient in using knives. The victims showed no signs of fierce resistance, proving that the killer had great physical strength. Good can quickly control the victim. Except the first case, the remaining cases all happened on weekends. Seeing that the ragged man could have a stable job, he seemed to hate prostitution very much. All the people were prostitutes. This may be related to his personal experience. Based on these points, the police have identified some. The suspect is as follows. Suspect description: John Dewitt, 31 years old, occupation, lawyer, father. He was a famous surgeon and from a young age was exposed to and learned a lot of knowledge about anatomy. According to the investigation, his mother and grandmother both suffered from serious mental illness on that day. December 30th of 1888. Month went to the bridge and did the leak repair. This time is 1 month after the last murder. In the case that took place after his death, Jack Zyper disappeared without a traces. So there is a hypothesis that Montage is the suspect. J.A. Zyper Francis. T.I. was an Eisenborn physician who travelled extensively throughout Europe. Francis hates women, especially prostitutes. One night at a drinking party, he showed off his collection of female organs to everyone and proudly showed it off. His collection came from women from all walks of life during the time of the Jack the Ripper murders. Dear Francis was arrested by police in the White County area for sexual harassment while he was out on bail, knowing that the police had listed him as a suspect in a serial murder case. He fled to the US. An attempt was made to extradite him from the US but failed due to lack of evidence. Francis then lived in the US until his death. The suspect, Severin Kossoff, was born in Poland at the age of 14. He was sent by his family He went to work as an assistant to a surgeon. He then took up some surgical science and worked in a hospital as an assistant with some knowledge of anatomy shortly before the deeper tear incident occurred. He came to him and worked as an assistant at a barber shop in the Whitechapel area in 1891. He came to America because he was suspected. Because he later poisoned people, killed his 3 wives. This serial killing act makes people think to tear the deeper. He was arrested in 1903 and was sentenced to death. So it is suggested that Sarah Dern is Jack the Ripper suspecting William. This is a female suspect. Her husband is John William. The British royal physician in 2017, while arranging his wife's remains, William's husband was accidentally discovered a scalpel 2.5 cm wide and 15 cm long. The knife above is a perfect match for the murder weapon used by Jack the Ripper. John Gam and Jane Kelly, one of the victims, had a long-term affair. His wife, Niji, cannot give birth, so his wife, her husband, had separated. Some people believe that in a fit of jealousy, Niji had committed suicide. The hand that murdered these women also explains why the victims' uteruses were so damaged. Famadon Kimesk was a Jewish immigrant who worked as a barber in the White County area. He was once one of the police's prime suspects, and a witness claimed that Aon was the killer. But this person did not want to provide evidence against the Jews, so Adon B. was not prosecuted for mental illness. In 1891, he threatened a woman with a knife and was subsequently taken to prison. In the mental hospital, he was always afraid of being poisoned by others, refused to take a bath. On September 9th in 1919, Aon died in a mental hospital at the age of 53. In 2007, Rel Edward, a British businessman, purchased Catherine's shawl, which was found on the night of the murder. A lab auction extracted the victim's DNA from Catherine and the DNA from an unidentified man from this shawl. After comparison, the lab found that this man's DNA matched the DNA of descendants of suspect Adon Kosminski. They believe that J. Shripper is Aaron Tai. However, this result has been questioned by other experts who believe that the shawl may have been contaminated before being tested in the laboratory because it was touched by many people in public exhibitions, thus resulting in the laboratory results are not convincing. And this DNA test report has never been evaluated by any standards. Other reviews so unreliable conclusion. Aiden Kutminski is Jar the Reaper still caused many avoid the due technical limitations at the time. Evidence was not well preserved. Investigators also lacked awareness of the preservation of the scene. If those evidences are preserved intact and modern forensic techniques are applied, perhaps the case could have been solved more than 100 years ago. The identity of R. the Deeper. It remains a mystery whether he is Adon KBSK the barber or not. Someone else, maybe only Torn, knows the answer. Today's video ends. That's it for now, and see you in the next videos. Hello?